Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. This was Jia Lai's first time serving as a Dharma protector in a trial by fire for Bloodmaster. As such, he was completely unaware of what others who were participating in the trial might have encountered in the worlds they entered. However, he was convinced that his experience was completely unlike the experiences of anyone else. In fact, he had the feeling that throughout all the trials by fire the Bloodstream sect had held from ancient times until now, no one had ever done what Nightcrypt was doing. He had no way to confirm whether his theory was correct, but when he looked around at the world trembling, and all the living things prostrating in worship to Bai Xiaochun, he impulsively followed suit. As Bai Xiaochun stood there on the mountain top, he was suddenly struck by the strange sensation that he could actually destroy the entire world with a single thought. As of this moment, his undying live forever technique was in full operation, and after a moment passed, he realized there was a voice whispering in his ear. Come, come, come. Snapping out of his reverie, his eyes shone, and he took a deep breath. Then he pulled his hand back from the stone steel. Everything in the world began to shine with bright, blood-colored light, which all shot toward Bai Xiaochun, surrounding him. The crimson light transformed into a door, which slowly opened right in front of him. He looked at the door hesitantly for a moment, aware that if he stepped through it, he would be able to enter the second stage. Looking around at the world one more time, he stepped forward and vanished into the blood-colored light. At some unknown location within the body of the blood ancestor, there was an open space that seemed to have no beginning or end, and was as quiet as death. The only thing visible were numerous cone-shaped pillars which rose up from the darkness below. At the top of each pillar was a platform. Two of those platforms were much taller than the others, but not very far away from each other. Shuimei was on one, and Song Junwan the other. Both of them sat cross-legged, staring at each other. They had been sitting there for less than 2 hours. Because of the command medallion each of them possessed, they didn't need to acquire the approval of the blood ancestor the way the Dharma protectors did. They had come directly to this place to wait. Time flowed differently in the endless world of blood. In the 2 hours that had passed for Shuimei and Song Junwan, an entire month had gone by inside. Based on the analyses of both women, they would need to wait several more hours before any of the Dharma protectors began to emerge. In any case, the second stage of the trial by fire could not begin until both women used their command medallions to open it. Neither of them would be willing to do that until their Dharma protectors were all accounted for. The two of them had been exchanging barbs back and forth the entire time, and after a short respite, it was Shuimei who resumed the conversation. Chuckling coldly, she said, Song Junwan, why fight with me over the Bloodmaster position, considering how old you are? Is it really true that the Song clan couldn't find anyone better, and was forced to let an old woman champion their cause? Song Junwan frowned, and she was just about to respond in kind when suddenly, her expression flickered, and she looked up into the air. Shuimei also looked up, her pupils constricting. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the shape of a huge door slowly took form. Someone got the approval of the world will so quickly. Shuimei thought. It's only been 2 hours. That's about a month in the endless world of blood. Shuimei's eyes widened, and her heart filled with shock. She was very familiar with how the Bloodmaster trial by fire worked. Supposedly, the most quickly a Dharma protector had ever obtained approval in the past was 3 hours, which was a month and a half on the inside. Who is it? Song Junwan thought, equally shaken. Who overcame the other Dharma protector in the endless world of blood, dealt with the countless blood beasts, and still managed to get the approval of the will of the world? The fighting must have been intense for this person to have finished so quickly. Whoever this person was, if it ended up being one of her own Dharma protectors, she would obviously be thrilled. However, if it was one of Shuimei's Dharma protectors, that would pose a big obstacle in her attempt to win the position of Bloodmaster. After mentally reviewing all of her Dharma protectors, she couldn't think of any who could pull off such a feat. As such, her expression began to darken. And yet, Shuimei had the same reaction. As she reviewed her own list of Dharma protectors, she wasn't confident that any of them could do something like this. Along with Song Junwan, she stared up at the illusory door. A moment later, a blurry figure appeared within the door. It only took a few breaths of time for both women to see exactly who it was, and they both cried out in surprise. Nightcrypt, Nightcrypt. Shuimei's eyes flickered with killing intent, and her heart trembled with shock. She couldn't imagine how Nightcrypt had possibly acquired the approval of the world will so quickly. After her initial shock, Song Junwan's heart swelled with delight, and her beautiful eyes were glued to Bai Xiaochun. When Bai Xiaochun first stepped out of the door, his vision was swimming and he couldn't see clearly. It only lasted for a moment, though, and then he saw all of the countless platforms around him, as well as Shui Mei and Song Junwan. Junior brother Night Crypt, come on over here, Song Junwan said, smiling. Her voice was full of both tenderness and joy. Shui Mei snorted coldly, clenching her hands into fists. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, then headed over to Song Junwan. As soon as he touched down onto the platform, he walked over to her side. I'm the first? He asked quizzically. Of course you are, Song Junwan said, smiling sweetly. How did you do it? Who was your opponent? To Bai Xiaochun, her smile only seemed to reveal her inner vixen. However, he didn't allow his true feelings to show. He stuck his chin up, clasped his hands behind his back, and tried to look as proud and murderous as possible. Oh, it was simple, he said in a calm, deep voice. I just walked through the world. As for my opponent, I never asked his name. From his wording and posture, he seemed completely proud and aloof. As for how he called the endless world of blood, simple, both Shui Mei and Song Junwan could well imagine him summoning his blood sword and slashing his way through the world. He likely ignored the countless attacking blood beasts, not even deigning to look at the world around him as he slaughtered his way to gain the approval of the world will. Song Junwan's eyes glowed even more brightly before when she looked at Bai Xiaochun, and as for Shui Mei, she couldn't help but stare at him. Moments later, both women realized that he wasn't wounded at all, and their expressions flickered. Just when Song Junwan was about to ask about it, Bai Xiaochun flicked his sleeve and coolly said, I'm tired. Please let me know when the second stage is about to begin. With that, he walked off to the side, where he sat down cross-legged, looking as arrogant as a wizened pine tree on top of a mountain. When he closed his eyes, his cold, cruel face and murderous aura caused Song Junwan's words to stick in her throat. Inwardly, Bai Xiaochun was laughing, and felt very proud of himself. As far as he was concerned, he was completely outstanding and utterly superior to everyone. Wait, I need to do something to make it seem a bit more realistic, he thought. With that, he slowly lifted his head and looked off into the distance, eyes filling with a look of melancholy and introspection. That left Song Junwan and Shui Mei even more shaken, although they weren't sure exactly what it meant. Time passed. 2 hours later, the air up above once again began to ripple and distort, and the door appeared again. A burly, dangerous-looking man appeared, seemingly out of breath as he emerged into the open. As soon as Shui Mei saw him, she broke out into a smile. The burly man clasped hands and bowed to her in greeting, then approached the platform and sat down next to her. When he saw Bai Xiaochun over on the other platform, his heart filled with shock. He had assumed that he would be the first to emerge, and would never have even guessed that Night Crypt would be faster. As the hours passed, more and more Dharma protectors appeared. Song Ke was one of them, although he looked exhausted, and his body was riddled with wounds. Clearly, it had been a difficult task for him to win the approval of the world will. 10 hours later, the final Dharma protector appeared, and the first stage was officially over. Both Song Junwan and Shui Mei had selected their Dharma protectors carefully, and all of them were extraordinary in some way. Unexpectedly, the two groups had been quite evenly matched, as there were now exactly 10 Dharma protectors on either side. The two women exchanged a frosty glance, and then both of them snorted coldly. Turning to their Dharma protectors, they began to explain the second stage. During the first stage, Song Junwan began, You Dharma protectors fought for the approval of the world, and I did not participate. In the second stage, the fighting will be more brutal, and I will participate. The second stage is called the Blood Wasteland. It is a road without end, over which a deathly wind blows every 14 hours. Once that wind blows, every living thing within the Blood Wasteland will be killed, reduced to nothing more than a skeleton. That is the path that leads to the heart cavity. Put simply, we have exactly 14 hours to search the Blood Wasteland for the keys which lead to the heart cavity. Off in the distance, Shui Mei was making a similar explanation to her Dharma protectors. Every 2 hours, a key will appear at a random location within the wasteland. Anyone who gets one of the keys, and holds onto it until the 14 hours have passed, will be teleported to the ancient blood path which leads to the heart cavity. Of course, Shui Mei and I don't need keys to enter the ancient blood path. There are a total of 7 keys, which means that only 7 Dharma protectors can enter the ancient blood path with Shui Mei and myself. Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered, as did the expressions of everyone else except for Song Ke. One of them, a middle-aged cultivator, lowered his voice and asked, What about the people who don't get a key? Song Junwan looked at the man for a moment, and then replied, We are fighting as a team, and whichever party gets the most keys will be the winner. The disciples on the winning team who don't get keys will not be teleported to the ancient blood path, but neither will they be killed. They will simply be ejected. As for the losing team, whoever among them don't get keys will all be killed after the 14 hours are up. Those are the rules, and not even the patriarchs can interfere to save the losers. Therefore, this is not the time for infighting. If a key falls into the hands of one of Shui Mei's Dharma protectors, feel free to attack them. If your own teammates get them, however, you are prohibited from competing amongst yourselves. Infighting will not only increase our chances of losing, it could also lead to your deaths. The lot of you are either members of the Song clan, or here because of certain promises I made. If I become Bloodmaster, your future prospects will be limitless. Everything that I have promised you, I will see done. If I lose, and Shui Mei succeeds, then all of us will meet a grisly fate. With that, Song Junwan clasped hands and bowed deeply to Bai Xiaochun and the other Dharma protectors. The 10 Dharma protectors, Bai Xiaochun included, all had different reactions to Song Junwan's words. As for Song Ke, his expression darkened slightly, but other than that, didn't change much. Because of his position in the Song clan, he actually knew more about the Bloodmaster trial by fire than most did. After all, if he hadn't failed to reach Heaven Dao Foundation establishment, he would have been the one taking the lead in this trial by fire. However, because he wasn't a match for Shui Mei, the Song clan had chosen Song Junwan as the one to vie for the middle peak Bloodmaster position which the clan had held for generations. Because of how things had played out, Song Ke was on the bad side of many of the older generation of the Song clan. In turn, the rise of Night Crypt had put even more pressure on him. That was especially true considering that Song Junwan had come to favor Night Crypt. Song Ke was left with few options. The Song clan had deep roots in the Bloodstream sect, and had many direct bloodline clan members. Song Ke was the face of the current generation of direct bloodline descendants, but that only meant that there were plenty of people hoping to see him fail miserably so that they could then replace him. He needed to blaze a path for himself, to go all out with everything he had, to try to make sure his aunt succeeded. Only in that way would he be able to prove how valuable he was. That was also the only hope he had of eventually succeeding his aunt as Bloodmaster in the future. Suppressing his revulsion for Night Crypt, he was the first one to speak up after Song Junwan finished talking. I will do everything in my power to gain victory in the Blood Wasteland, and I will definitely not allow any infighting to occur. Grand Elder, please rest at ease. If anyone dares to cause problems, then if we get out alive, and that person also survives, then I'll teach him what it means to live a life worse than death. Song Q's eyes shone with intense light, and were filled with killing intent. As for the other Dharma protectors, they were left with little choice of what to do. In the Bloodstream sect, cultivators loved to fight each other. But in this case, if they lost, they would all die. Therefore, they had to band together as a team to fight and defeat their opponents. After a moment of silence, the Dharma protectors began to speak out. Grand Elder, as long as you can fulfill your promise, then I won't hesitate to put my life on the line. The Song clan has treated me well, and I'll definitely repay the favor. Already, they were less on guard against the people standing next to them. Bai Xiaochun was starting to get anxious, and couldn't help but feel that Song Junwan had conned him. He had been aware that the trial by fire would be dangerous, but never could he have imagined that the danger would be completely out of his own control. If the entire team failed, he could end up dead. Even as he was sighing inwardly, he suddenly realized that the whole group was looking at him. Without any hesitation he tilted his head back arrogantly, a cold look in his eyes as he said, "For Junwan, I would go through hell or high water. It's my duty." Strange looks could be seen on the faces of the other Dharma protectors, and Song Ke gritted his teeth. However, he knew that he had no choice but to let go of his hatred for Night Crypt. Snorting coldly, he looked away. Song Junwan glanced at Bai Xiaochun apologetically, but didn't offer any words of consolation. Instead, she offered one final warning. There are 3 people you need to be especially careful of. They are Yang Hengwu, Xiao Qing and Zhang Yunshan. Of those 3, Yang Hengwu and Zhang Yunshan likely possess powerful magical items. As for Xiao Qing, her expression suddenly flickered with dread. He should have reached core formation long ago, but hasn't. In the past, he served as Patriarch Limitless personal attendant. With that, she went on to give more details about the group of 3 cultivators. Bai Xiaochun's nervousness was mounting. About the same time that Song Junwan finished speaking, Shui Mei also finished explaining matters to her Dharma protectors, who all seemed to be bursting with killing intent and murderous auras, and were looking over menacingly at Bai Xiaochun and those around him. Of course, Song Ke took the lead in doing the same, and Bai Xiaochun was more than happy to join in. Even back in the Spirit Stream sect, he had participated in such staring contests. HMMMPH. I'm not afraid of anybody in competitions like these. Although his eyes widened into a glare, he couldn't stop thinking about the three people Song Junwan had just described, and after finding them in the group, he fixed their facial features in his mind. He would well imagine that he might run into them in the Blood Wasteland, and end up fighting bloody battles over the keys. Only a total of 7 people would be able to enter the 3rd level, the Ancient Blood Path. Whoever those people ended up being, they would have a profound influence on who became Blood Master in the end. At this point, Shui Mei took a deep breath and said, "Shall we open the door, Song Junwan?" She waved her right hand through the air, and a bright red light appeared in her palm, which flew out into the air in the form of a blood-colored command medallion. That command medallion instantly became the center of all attention. Even Bai Xiaochun took a closer look. Both Shui Mei and Song Junwan possessed such medallions, which not only let them bypass the 1st level, but ensured that they didn't need to get a key to enter the Ancient Blood Path. It's like all the decisions about this trial by fire were made behind closed doors, and everybody knows it. Sighing, he looked over at Song Junwan. Song Junwan's eyes flashed as she also extended her right hand, causing the 2nd blood-colored command medallion to appear in her palm. Blood-colored light spread out from the 2 command medallions, flying up into the air above the platforms. As the light spread out, everything was bathed in crimson, and at the same time, the outline of a huge door appeared. As the door opened, pulses of heaven shaking, earth-shattering energy rolled out. 2 beams of blood-colored light then shot towards Song Junwan and Shui Mei, connecting with their command medallions and merging into their bodies. The 2nd stage is starting. Follow me. With that, Song Junwan flew into the air, followed closely behind by Song Ke. The other Dharma protectors flew out into formation around Song Junwan, Bai Xiaochun included, and the entire group shot toward the blood-colored door. They managed to beat Shui Mei into motion, and even as the 11 of them flew into the door, Shui Mei and her group sped into motion behind them, transforming into beams of light that also shot toward the door. Soon, not a single person could be seen on the platforms. The blood door slowly faded away, and within a few breaths of time, was gone. The Blood Wasteland looked exactly as its name implied. It was a huge desert, filled with crimson sand and grit. Just looking around, it seemed like a completely barren wasteland. Hot, screaming winds gusted, sending sand flying around everywhere. It seemed bleak and destructive, a place devoid of life. Within the swirling deadliness of the desert sands, bleached bones were occasionally revealed, the remains of people who had died in previous trials by fire for the Middle Peak Blood Master position. Bai Xiaochun instantly sensed the aura of death which pervaded the entire area. Then he saw a nearby skeleton, and his pupils constricted. He wasn't the only one who had such a reaction. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, the first key will appear, Song Junwan said. Whenever a key appears, it will send a huge pillar of light up into the sky, a pillar of light that will not disappear, not even when the key is attained. Everyone split up. When that first pillar of light appears, head in that direction. Remember, fighting each other over the keys is not allowed. Whoever gets it first must be offered protection by everyone else. I plan to offer myself up as bait to Shui Mei. Knowing her deviousness, she won't wait until the Ancient Blood Path opens up before trying to kill some of you. She'll definitely start here, and will probably ask for help from her Dharma protectors to kill me. Even if she wasn't planning to do that, I'll try to goad her into it. If she did have that plan all along, well then, I think she'll be surprised at how things turn out. For the next 14 hours, everything is up to you Dharma protectors. With that, she flew off by herself. Some distance away, she called out in a powerful voice that spread out in all directions, "Shui Mei, do you dare to come out and fight me?" Not too far away from Bai Xiaochun and his group, Shui Mei and her team were just now appearing. When she heard Song Junwan's voice, her eyes flickered coldly. "Don't worry about me," she said to her people. "You go get the keys. I'll handle Song Junwan." With that, she flew in Song Junwan's direction. It only took a moment before they were closing in on each other, eyes bursting with killing intent. Apparently, Patriarch Limitless and the Song clan Patriarch had reached an agreement. Song Junwan had a higher cultivation base, but didn't possess any spectacular precious treasures. As for Shui Mei, her cultivation base wasn't quite as high, but she had many precious magical items, and was at the peak of Earthstring Foundation establishment. As such, they were relatively evenly matched. In the blink of an eye, explosive combat was already underway. As the two began to fight, booms filled the sky, rumbling out in all directions. Everyone else looked on with serious expressions. Song Ke was actually shocked that Song Junwan would be so daring. However, after only a moment of hesitation, he picked a direction and started flying. Everyone else followed suit, their admiration for Song Junwan growing. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times as he watched Song Junwan, then quickly picked a direction and sped into motion. I never would have thought Song Junwan would put herself up as bait to get Shui Mei to fight. She must be well prepared for this. But then again, so must Shui Mei. Presumably, it won't be easy to secure a complete victory in the second stage. I bet the two shrews are just trying to feel each other out. Shaking his head, he sped along, already having decided that no matter what happened, he would not try to fight for the first key. Let them fight over the first key, I don't care. Whoever gets it will have a bitter struggle keeping it until the end. Although this trial by fire didn't seem as intense as the Fallen Sword world, there was a time limit. Furthermore, the threat of death hung over everyone's heads. The fighting to come would surely result in bloody carnage. HMMMPH. Whoever runs into one of those keys first is going to have some bad luck. No, wait, bad, horrific luck. As he sped along, he pondered the best way to hide safely off in the distance. Occasionally, he would look around, sighing. That was when, all of a sudden, right up ahead of him, a blood-colored light appeared. What's that? He said, taken aback. Within the space of a few breaths of time, the light grew so intense it hurt his eyes to look at it. Then, it turned into a pillar that shot up into the sky. Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped at the sight of the pillar of light, especially considering that floating right there in the middle of it was a key, right within arm's reach. He took a deep breath. How could he ever have imagined that the random direction he picked to run in would turn out to be the exact location where the first key appeared? Simultaneously, the appearance of the pillar of light caused Shui Mei and Song Junwan to stop fighting for a moment and look over. Also, the Dharma protectors from both sides, regardless of where they were, all stopped in place and looked over. The people who had been selected as Dharma protector for this trial by fire were all outstanding individuals. Obviously, they all knew that the first person to get one of the keys would automatically be put in a very difficult position. Every single one of them seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then they all started flying at top speed toward the light, bristling with murderous auras. Anybody who fights with me over that key had better not blame me for killing them. Song Ke howled, the battle prowess of 8 earth-string tide flows surging around him. Everybody else might be afraid of you, but not me, Zhou Hua. Snatch that blood key. As the voices of the Dharma protectors rang out, it heralded the beginning of the fierce fighting that was destined to take place in the Blood Wasteland. When Bai Xiaochun heard the voices rising up, he shivered and said, "Damn it. I gotta get out of here." By that point, more than a dozen figures were already heading in his direction. Bai Xiaochun gasped and quickly began to back up. However, the instant he began to move, to his complete and utter disbelief, the blood-colored key began to move, straight toward him. Heavens, how could a key move? Bai Xiaochun was about to cry. Currently, one of Shui Mei's Dharma protectors was closing in, and as soon as he caught sight of the blood-colored key, his killing intent surged. Clearly, his first goal was not to get the key, it was to kill Bai Xiaochun. He was in the late Foundation establishment stage, and held a blood-colored greatsword in his hand. When Bai Xiaochun saw the man's deadly-looking blood sword, and his violent killing intent, it was obvious that the man wanted to kill him. Bai Xiaochun immediately got angry. Why you're pushing things too far. I just saw the key and didn't even touch it, and yet you're gonna try and kill me? His eyes narrowed, flickering coldly. Although he hadn't fought much in the Bloodstream sect, his battle prowess had increased to a dramatically terrifying level. Even as the sword slashed down toward him, he planted his right foot down onto the ground and then sprang forward with all the power he could muster. He instantly blurred into motion, leaving nothing for the sword to slash through other than afterimages. In the blink of an eye, he had bashed directly into Shui Mei's Dharma protector. It was none other than the mountain-shaking bash. It was backed by the power of Heaven Dao Foundation establishment and 3 crystallized spiritual seas, which meant he was in mid-foundation establishment. It was powered by the second level of the Undying Heavenly King, the fleshly body strength of 6 berserk ghosts. The mountain-shaking bash was a secret magic of the Undying Codex, and when fueled by such multiple levels of incredible power, it ensured that Bai Xiaochun was now like a vicious beast. A bang rang out in all directions, low-pitched but shocking to the extreme. It was hard to imagine that a collision between 2 people would produce a sound as tragic as this. Shui Mei's Dharma protector screamed, and then blood spurted out of his mouth. Much of his body was already shattering, but that wasn't the end of things. His back bulged out, and his face turned violet as cracking sounds rang out from inside of him. He began to spin backward through the air, his expression blank, his mind rapidly emptying. At the same time, the dozens of other cultivators who were converging on the area looked on with tingling scalps as the Dharma protector who had just been bashed by Bai Xiaochun exploded. Bones, flesh, and blood spattered in all directions, and the man's soul was transformed into ash. Even as his scream continued to echo about, he was killed in body and soul. In any other sect, what had just happened would have left everyone too stunned to do anything. But this was the Bloodstream sect, and its cultivators were cruel and merciless. Shuimei's other Dharma protectors quickly overcame their shock, and 3 of their number were the first to fly toward Bai Xiaochun. 2 of them were in late Foundation establishment, and 1 of them was in the Great Circle. As they flew forward, 3 blood swords appeared, causing everything in the area to rumble. Most shocking among the group was one of the late Foundation establishment cultivators, a middle-aged man with a long beard. Shockingly, he held an illusory stick of incense in his hand. The incense was already burning, creating an aura that filled Bai Xiaochun with an intense sensation of deadly crisis. It was like every inch of his flesh and blood were screaming at him that this incense was completely and utterly dangerous. Bai Xiaochun wasn't the only one to have such a reaction. The faces of the others in the area instantly fell. That's Yang Hongwu. He's the one Song Junwan said to look out for. Bai Xiaochun gasped, but what happened next caused his scalp to almost explode. There were about 4 or 5 people who, apparently because of the stimulation of the mysterious incense, began to emit auras, either from within their own bodies, or their bags of holding, that were all terrifyingly dangerous. Apparently, they were on the verge of joining the attack on him. Bai Xiaochun had a profound cultivation base that enabled him to kill a late Foundation establishment cultivator with a single bashing attack. However, to face 3 at the same time, one of them being in the Great Circle and in possession of a shocking magical treasure, left him shocked and terrified. More than ever, he felt that the older generation in the Bloodstream sect were all fear-inspiring individuals. All of the Foundation establishment cultivators who Shuimei and Song Junwan had called upon to act as Dharma protectors were either chosen of their generation, or other famous individuals from the past. That was especially true of the one terrifying cultivator Song Junwan had mentioned, Xiaoqing, who, for some mysterious reason, hadn't broken through into the core formation stage. Regarding magical treasures, the fact that Bloodstream sect cultivators were fond of robbing and pillaging meant that they tended to have a bit more of them than disciples from other sects. Considering the danger he was facing, it was no surprise that Bai Xiaochun's scalp crawled with terror. However, none of that showed on his face. Backing up, expression cold, he said, "Nightcrypt doesn't have time to fool around with you people. I'm warning you, don't provoke me." Combined with his icy, cruel expression, Bai Xiaochun was under the impression that his words were completely domineering. Turning, he pushed forward with a burst of speed and vanished. Even as he sped off, the 3 blood swords descended in a net of death. They missed him, but the smoke from the incense swirled around, filling the area with terrifying fluctuations. Even the mere sensation of those fluctuations caused Bai Xiaochun to pick up speed. Even as he left the first key behind, intense fighting broke out in his wake. However, not everyone joined the attack. Some stood off to the side, and some merely left, clearly thinking the same thing that Bai Xiaochun had, that fighting over the first key was too dangerous. Bai Xiaochun flew off into the distance, looking over his shoulder occasionally. Considering that everyone was in the late Foundation establishment stage or even more powerful than that, the fighting was clearly a life or death matter. Nobody was holding back, and some people were already resorting to their life-saving magical items. Heaven-shaking, earth-shattering explosions rocked the area, and fluctuations that bordered on core formation could be felt, leaving Bai Xiaochun completely shaken. With the undying Heavenly King, I might be able to take them on one by one, but fighting so many people at the same time, I might lose my poor little life. Picking up speed, he sighed emotionally as he thought about how coincidental it was that the key had appeared right in front of him moments ago. Assuming he kept on flying as he was now, there shouldn't be any more such incidents. As far as the fighting went, Bai Xiaochun felt that maybe after the 4th key showed up, it would be a bit safer to start participating. After flying along for the better part of 2 hours, he had put quite a bit of distance between himself and the last location, and finally decided to look around for a place to meditate for a while. I've flown far enough away that I shouldn't run into anyone else, he thought. As for the keys, whoever wants to fight over them can have it. He was quite pleased at his own insightfulness, and was just musing about how bright and intelligent he was when the 3rd hour in the Blood Wasteland arrived. In that very moment, Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and he let out an exclamation of shock. There, right in front of him, was a bright red dot of light. Within the space of a few breaths of time, it began to grow so brightly that it turned into a pillar of light that shot up into the sky. Anyone in the blood wasteland would be able to see it. It was a very strange thing, and all of a sudden, Bai Xiaochun thought back to what had happened in the endless world of blood. No way, he thought. I'm not the one trying to become Bloodmaster. How could this be happening? Staring at the key in the pillar of light, he sighed, and then turned to leave, only to find that the key was flying toward him. Get away from me. Stop following me. Thinking about how the group of people had been fighting earlier, he wanted to cry. The terrifying ripples that had spread out from that fight were enough to send him running in the opposite direction. However, the key behind him picked up speed, chasing Bai Xiaochun relentlessly through the blood wasteland. Soon, cultivators on both sides of the conflict realized what was happening, and their eyes went wide with disbelief. The first key appeared right in front of Bai Xiaochun. That could have been chalked up to chance. But for the second key to do the same, they gritted their teeth and told themselves that it was another coincidence. And yet, they were completely dumbfounded at the sight of the key chasing Bai Xiaochun. What's going on? Am I seeing things? That blood-colored key is actually chasing Nightcrypt? This. Although people were shocked, it didn't take long before them to react, and they began to speed toward Bai Xiaochun to start fighting for the key. Meanwhile, up in midair, Shui Mei and Song Junwan saw what was happening. Song Junwan looked angry. She had seen what had happened with Bai Xiaochun earlier, and felt it was a true pity that he had passed up the first key. Now here he was flying along while the key chased him, refusing to grab it. Song Junwan was furious. Nightcrypt, she yelled. The key is right behind you. Take it immediately. Everybody else, protect Nightcrypt. Bai Xiaochun hesitated for a moment, but when he considered that if he wanted to become a Grand Elder eventually, he would need Song Junwan's recommendation, and that she had just openly given him an order, he gritted his teeth, stopped in place and reached out to solemnly grab the key. In that instant, the second blood-colored key suddenly erupted with dazzling light and shot into his hand. For some reason, Bai Xiaochun was certain that, as it did, he heard something like a cry of joy. Come help me, he cried. There was no time to think. He immediately began to back up as Song Junwan's other Dharma protectors arrived to intercept the enemy. A moment later, magical combat erupted all around him, causing resounding booming sounds to shake heaven and earth. Not everyone was present, in fact, not even 10 people were here. However, magical items were unleashed, and terrifying fluctuations spread out. It was in that moment that someone shouted out in alarm. Wait a second, why is the blood-colored light so faint? The person to shout out was one of Shui Mei's Dharma protectors, and currently, his face was a mask of incredulity as he stared at Bai Xiaochun. As his voice echoed out, everyone else looked over, and soon, all of their minds were reeling. Bai Xiaochun had actually noticed what was happening before anyone else. As soon as his fingers closed around the blood-colored key, the light that had been bursting out of it began to flow into his mouth. Once inside of him, it surged through his body, causing his undying heavenly king to operate at full function. The blood-colored light emanating out from the key immediately began to grow dim. It almost looked to everyone else as if Bai Xiaochun were eating the key. The effect was so pronounced that everyone could clearly sense the key growing weak. He's actually drawing on the power of the key? That's not just drawing on some of its power, he's obviously eating it. Nightcrypt, stop that immediately. Heavens, I've never heard of anybody doing such a thing. If he completely eats it, will its teleportation powers still work? People were so taken aback all they could do was stare in shock. Even Song Junwan and Shui Mei, who were still locked in combat in midair, were staring at the blood-colored light fading away. Within the space of a few breaths of time, the light was completely gone. What was left in Bai Xiaochun's hand didn't look anything like a key anymore. Even as everyone stared at Bai Xiaochun, his aura surged, and the power of the undying heavenly king exploded ferociously inside of him. He was about to try to explain, but when he opened his mouth, a burp echoed out loud and clear. Burp. I didn't burp. Do it on purpose. Burp. Bai Xiaochun was so scared he was about to cry. Clasping his hands over his mouth, he looked around at the incredulous stares being leveled at him, which rapidly began to fill with killing intent. More nervous than ever, he began to back up. He actually ate that key. The key's gone. That's 1 spot out of 7. Gone. Kill Nightcrypt. This is his fault. Kill him. The first and second keys both showed up near him. If the third one does the same and he eats that too, we'll lose another spot. What if he eats all the keys? If that happens, we'll all be losers. As their minds spun with the thought of what could happen, they howled and charged toward Bai Xiaochun. As for Song Junwan's Dharma protectors, they hesitated for a moment, but then refrained from interfering. The scene which had just played out was simply too bizarre. Another of Shuimei's Dharma protectors was a bit further off in the distance. After watching the depressing scene play out, and then hearing everyone crying out, his own anger surged, and he shot after Bai Xiaochun. By now, 8 or 9 people were chasing him, the weakest of them being in the late Foundation establishment stage, with more than one being in the Great Circle. Most shocking of all was that several of them were clutching powerful magical treasures. Bai Xiaochun was trembling in fear, but thankfully, was fast enough to evade them as he fled for his life. Before Song Junwan and Shuimei could even react, a whole group was after Bai Xiaochun. They were completely taken aback. "You can eat those keys?" Song Junwan murmured. Shuimei was equally stunned. Bai Xiaochun flew through the blood wasteland at top speed. Some among the pursuers were faster than the others, but all were slower than Bai Xiaochun, and before long, there was quite a distance between chaser and chased. "Night Crypt, you will die beyond the shadow of a doubt this day. Damn it, I can't believe you completely absorbed that key. Why you?" Various divine abilities and magical techniques were unleashed, leaving Bai Xiaochun so frightened he felt like his scalp would explode from terror. He felt completely wronged, and even more so, angered. He almost thought about turning around and fighting, but there were just too many opponents, all of them with higher cultivation bases than him, and many with powerful magical treasures. Although Xiao Qing wasn't among their number, Bai Xiaochun had the feeling he might show up at any moment, and thus devoted himself fully to fleeing. Before long, the 3rd and 4th hours had passed, and the 5th hour was approaching. In that very instant, the group of pursuers were shocked to find that the 3rd dot of red light had appeared directly above Bai Xiaochun's head. Even as he moved along, a blinding beam of blood-colored light shot up, which continued to float along with Bai Xiaochun as he flew along. What exactly is going on here? Damn it, why is this happening? I can't believe the 3rd key appeared right above him. "Night Crypt, you will die this day." Shuimei's Dharma protectors were going mad. Were Zhao Lai here, he would tearfully tell them that this was nothing. Had they been by his side in the endless world of blood, they would have been driven to complete despair. Bai Xiaochun was really starting to get pissed off. Looking around at everyone, he gritted his teeth, reached up, and grabbed the 3rd blood-colored key. Rumbling sounds could be heard as massive amounts of blood-colored light poured into his mouth. Yet again, Bai Xiaochun seemed to be gobbling it up. He ate another one. There are only 7 keys, and he already ate 2. If he keeps this up, then he'll end up eating all the keys. We have to kill him. Everyone was starting to get anxious. Song Junwan's Dharma protectors were starting to hesitate, unsure of whether they should help Night Crypt or try to kill him. Up in midair, Shuimei's eyes glittered with cold light, and she suddenly waved her right hand, causing the bracelet wrapped around her wrist to flash with blue light. Instantly, a blue beam shot out, and even as she was about to send it flying toward Bai Xiaochun, Song Junwan swished her sleeve, sending out a blast of power to block the way. Shuimei glared at Song Junwan. "Song Junwan, something weird is going on with him. I refuse to believe that you can't see it." Song Junwan refused to respond, and simply launched another attack. Shuimei grinned malevolently. Since she was being prevented from doing anything about Bai Xiaochun, she unleashed her full power upon Song Junwan. By this point, the two of them weren't simply feeling each other out, they were fighting with everything they had, including their secret weapons. At the same time, just as murderous auras were beginning to rise up, the mad absorption of the blood-colored light by Bai Xiaochun caused cracking sounds to ring out from inside of him. The undying Heavenly King was operating at full speed with the nourishment that was being provided. Fleshly body power was rapidly building up, and clearly, Bai Xiaochun was rapidly reaching the point of breaking through from the level of 6 berserk ghosts to 7. Although he was being chased with murderous intent, the fact that his fleshly body was powering up so rapidly elated Bai Xiaochun. He could sense his power rapidly growing, and his battle prowess increasing. If I could complete the 2nd level of the undying Heavenly King, and form the Heavenly Demon body, then even if I run into one of those cultivators with the powerful magical treasures, I could still fight them. It's too bad I can't reveal my identity, otherwise I could definitely beat those old Foundation establishment experts. Considering how things are at the moment, what should I do? Moments ago, he had sensed that Shuimei had been about to unleash something incredibly dangerous on him, and as a result, was only getting more nervous. He looked over at Shuimei and Song Junwan briefly, then looked away. His head was starting to ache. Even as he tried to think of a way to resolve the situation, another sensation of imminent crisis filled him. This time, it didn't come from Shuimei, it came from behind him. One of Shuimei's Dharma protectors had been quietly closing in on him. It was none other than Yang Hongwu. His eyes flickered with cold, merciless light, and his hand clutched a burning stick of incense. Song Junwan had said to pay special attention to 3 of Shui Mei's Dharma protectors. One of them was Xiaoqing, who was on the very cusp of core formation. Perhaps because of certain conditions in the blood wasteland itself, it was difficult for him to break through here. However, one could imagine that even after half of a breakthrough, he would still be powerful enough to dominate anyone else. The second person Song Junwan had mentioned was Zhang Yunshan. The third was the very person who was closing in on Bai Xiaochun at this very moment. Yang Hongwu. Yang Hongwu's cultivation base was in the late foundation establishment stage, and he had a powerful magical treasure. It was essentially a precious relic that could unleash terrifying power that exceeded his current cultivation base realm. With that item, he was virtually invincible to anyone in the same realm as him. Up to this point in his cultivation, Bai Xiaochun had never possessed any powerful magical treasures other than the turtle walk. Had he remained in the Spirit Stream sect, he would definitely have been bequeathed one by the sect itself when he reached late foundation establishment. However, he had left when he was still in early foundation establishment before he qualified for such a reward. After all, such powerful magical treasures were generally not given to anyone under late foundation establishment. Not only would such a person have difficulty unleashing the full potential of the item, there was also the risk that it could be robbed from them. Bai Xiaochun's pupils constricted. Almost as soon as the smoke began to spread out from Yang Hongwu's incense, it filled his mind with a sense of imminent crisis. His fleshly body power was incredibly high, which lessened the sensation of danger, and yet, he was still jumpy with fear. From what he could sense, if that power continued to build up, then it could seriously affect him in a negative way. By this point, his eyes were completely bloodshot. There are too many people and too many eyes in this place. So many techniques that I just can't use. Bai Xiaochun gritted his teeth, and then began to draw upon the undying Heavenly King. His hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, and moments later, a bizarre power surged out from the palms of his hands. It was the power of gravity and repulsion, which he could just barely unleash. He had only ever scraped the surface of protomagnetic power, but was still able to call upon it when needed. Bai Xiaochun let out a hoarse shout as the 2 streams of power burst out, then converged together to form a powerful force of repulsion. He was immediately pushed backward at top speed, and in the blink of an eye, was speeding off into the distance. Even as he did, the smoke coming from Yang Hongwu's incense sliced through the air into the spot he had just occupied. Considering how it seemed to slash rifts everywhere it went, it was obvious that if Bai Xiaochun had been even a bit slower, he would have been cut to pieces. Shui Mei's Dharma protectors frowned, and killing intent flickered in Yang Hongwu's eyes. Bai Xiaochun had already evaded him twice, even with his powerful magical treasure. That was something he found to be highly unusual. Measly mortal Dao mid-foundation establishment. I can't believe he actually evaded me twice. Seems like he's harboring a lot of secrets. Yang Hongwu took a deep breath, and then his chest caved in. Suddenly, his speed skyrocketed, pushing him past all of the other cultivators, transforming him into a beam of light that shot directly after Bai Xiaochun. He breathed in, but never exhaled, and then, a few moments later, he took another deep breath. Yet again, his chest caved in, and his speed increased, closing the distance between himself and Bai Xiaochun. Seeing Yang Hongwu speed up toward him, Bai Xiaochun's eyes grew even more bloodshot than before. "You think I'm so easy to pick on?" he shouted. Suddenly he spun in place, and instead of fleeing, barreled toward Yang Hongwu. He shot faster than a bolt of lightning, appearing directly in front of Yang Hongwu and unleashing a punch with his right hand. Killing intent flickered in Yang Hongwu's eyes as he extended his own right hand. The incense burned, and smoke swirled out toward Bai Xiaochun. "So, you wanted to lure me out to fight alone? Fine, take your shot." Yang Hongwu laughed coldly as his powerful magical treasure spewed out even more smoke, creating a web of death that caused Bai Xiaochun's scalp to tingle so hard it felt like it might explode. And yet, he didn't dodge to the side. As the smoke bore down on him, he poured even more power into his fist strike. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the energy of the second level of Bai Xiaochun's undying Heavenly King erupted out. The power of 7 berserk ghosts could shake mountains, and at this moment, it caused sonic booms to echo out. The massive outpouring of power even caused a massive wind to spring up. From a distance, the scene playing out was completely shocking. As Bai Xiaochun punched out, the image of a berserk ghost appeared behind him. This was no ordinary berserk ghost, it was like the king of all berserk ghosts, and it howled at the top of its lungs as Bai Xiaochun punched out. Shockingly, the smoke which filled the area immediately began to shrink back as if it were about to be destroyed. Although all of this takes some time to describe, it actually happened in the time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the massive blast slammed into Yang Hongwu. Blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth as he was shoved backward. His eyes suddenly shone with intense fear. Obviously, he had been aware that Night Crypt possessed shocking battle prowess, but had still been confident enough to fight him alone. As of this moment, though, he could see that Night Crypt was even more terrifying than he had realized before. Blood also sprayed out of Bai Xiaochun's mouth, and he felt like his body was about to be torn to pieces by the web of death. The power of Yang Hongwu's magical treasure slashed into the image of the berserk ghost, and yet, the power of Bai Xiaochun's undying heavenly king ensured that he wasn't seriously injured, much less ripped to shreds. It took some effort, but he managed to wrench free from the smoke, destroying it in the process. Even as the wisps of smoke dissipated, the air not too far away from Bai Xiaochun distorted, and someone materialized. It was a young man with a fan in his hand. His expression was dark and somber, and his eyes flickered with killing intent. Without any hesitation, he waved his fan in Bai Xiaochun's direction. Wind screamed, transforming into a tornado that connected the sky and the land as it raced toward Bai Xiaochun. Zhang Yunshan. Bai Xiaochun's pupils constricted from the sensation of imminent crisis. Throwing his head back, he roared, and his energy began to rise as another berserk ghost appeared behind him, then a third, and a fourth. In the blink of an eye, 7 berserk ghosts had appeared, causing heaven and earth to shake violently. All of them threw their heads back and bellowed. Although the terrifying energy they were releasing wasn't quite enough to form the heavenly demon body, it was enough to create a giant hand. It was a giant, pale white hand, not the clawed hand of a ghost, but rather a heavenly demon hand. It was as pale as death, and the outlines of scales could just barely be seen on its surface, as well as vicious-looking bone spurs. As soon as the hand appeared, it smashed out toward Zhang Yunshan. The first thing it hit was the tornado. A huge boom echoed out as the tornado shattered, and at the same time, the heavenly demon hand flickered and faded a bit. However, it wasn't destroyed. Another boom could be heard, and blood oozed out of the corners of Zhang Yunshan's mouth. Even as he flew back at top speed, the heavenly demon hand faded away. Bai Xiaochun's face was ashen, and he coughed up another mouthful of blood. His eyes were crimson, making him look cruel and vicious to the extreme. With a quick glance at Yang Hongwu and Zhang Yunshan, he turned and sped off into the distance. Yang Hongwu hesitated for a moment, wiping the blood from his mouth. At the moment, he was too shaken to chase after Bai Xiaochun. The power that had just been unleashed, especially in that last attack, left him with the sinking feeling that Night Crypt hadn't even called upon his full battle prowess. Even Zhang Yunshan's sneak attack had done nothing more than cause Night Crypt to unleash even more power. Just how many secrets does this guy have? Yang Hongwu took a deep breath. As for the youthful-looking Zhang Yunshan, his face was equally grim as he watched Bai Xiaochun flee. The rest of the pursuers were completely shocked, and all hesitated. After a moment passed, though, Zhang Yunshan and Yang Hongwu exchanged a glance, and then their eyes flickered as they led the group in pursuit. Bai Xiaochun's face was ashen as he sped along. On the outside, he seemed vicious and cruel, with his clothes stained with blood. However, inside, he was listless and panting. What a bunch of bullies. If I didn't have to be careful to keep my secret identity, I could wipe the floor with them. Damn it, there are still 6 more hours left before this thing is over. His anxiety increased as the 7th hour neared. This time, he was mentally prepared. At the top of the hour, when the key was just about to appear, and he was just about to flee, he heard one of Song Junwan's other Dharma protectors crying out. Night Crypt, don't absorb any more keys. Give them to us. Night Crypt, stop it. Song K howled. It was at that exact moment that the 4th key popped out, and immediately began to speed toward Bai Xiaochun. It was almost as if he were a magnet, and no matter what he wanted, the keys would fly in his direction, transform into blood chi, and incite his undying heavenly king. Night Crypt, are you looking to die? Song K was furious, and the other Dharma protectors felt like they were going insane. Once they saw Bai Xiaochun starting to absorb the 4th key, they couldn't hold back any longer. After all, they weren't sure if the keys still counted as being won by their team if Bai Xiaochun absorbed them. If they did, then things were fine. But if they didn't, then when the wind of extermination swept through the wasteland, well, Song K and the others didn't dare to gamble on the outcome. I don't want this either. Bai Xiaochun wailed. His original plan had been to hide somewhere in the blood wasteland and let everyone fight it out, then snatch one of the keys toward the end. But now, all of his plans were laid to ruin. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.